I got a question for you. So,
Yeah,
this is kind of about video games, but it can also be about software or hardware or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah, we
Uh,
veered.
no, that's good. No, we're right on track.
All right.
Would like would you consider like I want to figure out how to frame this question. Like, say there's like a product that you like or you're like a fan of. Or maybe you admire or you might be interested in or like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the person behind that piece of art or work or whatever technology is a piece of shit.
Mm.
Do you allow that to affect your enjoyment of said product or art?
Man, that's a big question because that question came up a lot during the whole Me Too movement, right? Like with the whole like Louis C.K. thing, right? Obviously, the guy's a piece of shit, but it doesn't mean that his stuff's not funny. But do you support the comedy even though you know he's a piece of shit? Can you watch his old stuff before you knew he was a piece of shit? Can you separate the art from the artist? That's a big question. I still struggle with that. I don't know the answer. Uh, I guess in my world, like for me personally, I would say it depends on what kind of piece of shit that person is.
Uh huh.
Uh, like at this point, today on June 8th, 2020, if if someone's a racist piece of shit, I'm fucking done. Like I don't care what you've got. I don't want you take it with you. Get the fuck out. Don't
Mm-hmm.
want it. Um, and I'm getting, it's like that way. I'm that way with misogyny too. I don't want that. I don't want that poison in my life. And if you are bringing that to me, even indirectly through your thing, I just don't want it. Just there's so much else out there. It gets a little so it gets sticky when you have something that you can't get elsewhere. I don't have an example to give, but if you have something that you can't get anywhere else, how important is it to you? Is it more important than the way than you know that shitty thing that person does, and is consuming that thing that you can't get elsewhere? Um, like, are you supporting that shitty person and letting them be shittier by supporting them? Yeah, it's
It gets deep, right?
sticky. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
interesting. Like, that is a question I've kind of been asking myself a lot recently because, like,
Captain Tidbit says that's where you pirate.
yo, actually, that's a good point though. Like, I've definitely found myself like pirating things that I kind of don't want to find myself, accidentally supporting. Like, um, I don't have any examples on that specifically, but yeah, no, I think that's a good example of that. Like, um, I more recently, um, oh, uh, damn, I don't know if you've been following all the crazy shit that's been happening in the fighting game community.
Mm-mm.
Ooh, so talk about shit blowing up. So like, as far as like racism and misogyny and how they affect like a product or like an event or like a community of people. Um, the fighting game community has just kind of had a lot of accusations of like really gross sexual and predatory misconduct come out. Um, and like it's gone up as high as like one of the co-founders of Evo kind of like being a bit of a like pedophile predator. Um,
Ew.
yeah, and and so like um
Or
yeah, yeah, man, it's like I'm thankful that I don't have any close ties to these people because like it's so fucking complicated. Like it reminds me a lot of back in Omaha, Nebraska. There's a huge alternative culture, like it's like nerd culture and like nerd events, tournaments, cosplay events, you know, body painting, raves, you name it. there was so much of that stuff in Omaha, and like there was a like um you know a circuit of people that were always kind of connected to these events, but a lot of them are really really sketchy and predatory, and but they had so much pull in these circles, and a lot of them actually ran a lot of these events that like it was damn near impossible to weed them out, and there weren't enough people talking about it. And so it's like, okay, do you go to that event and choose to support it still, even though it's a lot of fun and your friends are gonna be there, but like awful things happen there. um it it's kind of one of those things. So like with the fighting game community, like uh this whole like COVID in the way like it rippled effect, like everything just like it was a perfect storm, man. Like Evo, like apparently like the new Mortal Kombat wasn't gonna be like a grand stage game at Evo initially, and so but then COVID happens, and then the Evo's offline event gets canceled. Evo, by the way, obviously I'm pretty sure the chat knows, but Evo is the biggest fighting game tournament in the world. It's a whole bunch of fighting games like are played at this event from people all around the world that travel to Las Vegas to compete. And if they are the best, they can win a lot of money. And it is a huge opportunity, especially in the age of like sponsorships, and like there's so much money getting into the fighting game community. Like people are building careers off the fighting game community, right? And so like this is a big deal. All of this stuff is a big deal. So Evo Online, like the fighting game community, like we can't stop playing fighting games competitively just because we can't go to offline events, right? And everyone acts like they hate online, but online's here to stay. And so Evo going online was kind of an acknowledgement of that. But so Mortal Kombat 11 now all of a sudden finds itself kind of in like this huge kind of opportunistic spot, because it has really good netcode, and you can't have an online tournament with a game with poor netcode when people from all around the world are going to be playing. And so Mortal Kombat becomes this premier spot for Evo Online. But then like things start getting weird. Like one of the like creators of, or like founders or lead guys for one of these fighting games that was going to be at this event made a strange joke on a stream about George Floyd and him being not being able to breathe, and that fucked his brand up. And one of his close friends is also a very famous Street Fighter or 2D fighting game player named Sonic Fox, whose career is like his video game career. And he found himself in a hot spot because those guys were friends, and he was still friends with this guy, and so he kind of was defending him and like defending his right to have an opinion as a black man, and but also still trying to stand for something. But this guy was now, people were like, hey man, that was a really shitty thing that you said and did. What makes you think that that was okay? But but he still had a spot at Evo. But then it turns out he was saying really really creepy things to women about behind the scenes, and so like then he had a sexual assault kind of allegation like leveled against him that really really fucked up his brand. But then you started seeing that a whole bunch all over the place, and like people just kind of have all of these awful stories, and then turned out one of the co-founders of Evo Online had his share of awful stories. And once that happened, everybody started pulling out of Evo. Like a bunch of commentators, a bunch of actual video game companies. Capcom pulled their games out. Tekken pulled their games out, or Namco pulled their games out. NetherRealm Studio.
When you talk about it, it sounds like a cesspool.
Yeah, it's like, and what's crazy is like there's a ginormous chunk of the video game community that is fantastic. A lot of these guys have no idea that this stuff was going on, but like like in like this like people that like really take the community seriously and are willing to kind of give their time and effort and energy to the community are kind of the most at risk, because they're usually younger and they're usually impressionable, and like they're usually like looking for an opportunity to kind of get in those cool clubs sometimes, like meeting cool people at a tournament, and making a cool connection with like a tournament organizer, or like um you know staying in a house full of streamers, or like things that don't sound like bad ideas on paper, except so much of this, like a lot of these guys, like a lot of these you know a lot of people in the gamer community are used to weird shit anyway. Like they're used to kind of being outcasts of society. There's anime, and hey, we watch hentai, and hey, there's furries, and hey, there's these weird games, and like these kind of like edgy things that are kind of accepted. And so and it also comes from this weird era of like people that say awful things as jokes because they think it's jokes, and they don't want to be checked for saying awful things. Like that kind of behavior has run rampant, and now we're in an age where we're no longer accepting it. And now it created this opportunity, this perfect storm, right, of all of these brands to be tarnished by bad behavior.
Yeah, I mean, that comedians have been talking about this shit for years. Like, what are you talking about? Shitty jokes about edgy things that, like, oh, well, come on, it's just a joke. Like, yeah, and I get that. Like, part of the appeal of some of those jokes is like that it makes people feel uncomfortable, right? But yeah, I think things are changing where more and more people are finding that less and less acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And people like Ricky Gervais, for example, has a hard time accepting that just because someone is offended by a joke. Like the way he thinks about it is, well, just because you're offended by the joke doesn't mean it's not a funny joke and I shouldn't tell it. Like, well, it doesn't mean that the people that laugh at your jokes aren't pieces of shit too.
Right.
I'm not saying that he is a piece of shit. I'm just saying that, it's like, it's weird. I don't know how to process all this. I'm no expert on it.
It's interesting. Like, I don't want to go full Joe Rogan experience, but I think it's interesting. Like, I actually think comedians I think they play an oddly important role in a post Donald Trump world. Because I think that, like, this idea of people being kind of all good or all bad, just simply doesn't exist. And I think that somewhere along the line, people got scared to have conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. I say this to my wife all the time, that like, yeah, no one's 100% bad, no one's 100% good, like you just said. And it's like, man, it's like the cop conversation too. Like, well, I don't know if I want to get into all that, but it's no cop, like, just no one person is 100% evil all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A bad cop can do good things, and a bad cop, or yeah, I forget.
Yeah, but no, I'm with you. Like, it's like it's more nuanced than that. I think like it's like this idea that there's no like in an era where, like, I don't know, there's like bad to worse, right? Like, worse is like, we have like, these kind of monsters in society that like have been allowed to be monsters, but like one of the biggest monsters in society, like one of the most dangerous men in, like, modern society, effectively conned his way into that position. And I say that not to get political, but to say that, like, the idea of like ultimate good and ultimate bad and being rewarded based on that kind of doesn't necessarily exist the way people think it does, right? And so I think comedians play an interesting role because, like, they 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 kind of define like where the line is in a sense. Like watching Dave Chappelle and his Sticks and Stones special, and it was at times so fucking grating. Like it's like even if you found it hilarious, like there's a good chance like if you're not a complete piece of shit, if you're moderately decent human being, some parts of that special probably made you relatively uncomfortable to say the least, right? Like maybe some of these things are kind of that was kind of tough to listen to or whatever, but like um but at the but it started this kind of huge conversation about like there were so many important things that were kind of being said, and I guess like even though a lot of what he said was really offensive and should absolutely be talked about and absolutely should be scrutinized and criticized in the name of free speech, like in the name of art, like but also looking at the person as well, and like Dave Chappelle isn't a piece of shit, you know what I mean? Like he says some awful things sometimes, but like this was also the person that gave us like the Clayton Bigsby, the black KKK member, or like the player haters ball where they went back in time and shot slave owners, and like really crazy provocative sketch comedy, like that's always kind of pushing the line. Like so with comedians, right? Like if they if they're pieces of shit, they're absolutely pieces of shit. If they say things that are offensive, it absolutely should be discussed. It needs to be discussed. But like but they're like you kind of have to, we have to figure out where the line is, right? Where people will like like what is it that people are actually pissed off about, or like where are the real issues? Like are the real issues like an offensive joke, or like some dude getting lynched, or like or like an offensive joke, or someone actually being sexually assaulted, or where are the lines? And like when is something like just like a good artistic, when is something a good talking point, you know what I mean? Like something even if it's bad, even if it's offensive, even if that guy is actually like maybe he isn't a rapist or a predator or a murderer or like anything weird, but maybe he is a piece of shit. Maybe he has a fucking terrible personality, and maybe he's fucking like manipulative and awful, like Kanye West, but like, but does that make his work any less provocative?
You mean President West?
No, that's not what I mean. I promise you that is not what I mean. I actually think that I think that I think that he's promoting an album. That's what I think.
Yeah, promoting an album and maybe helping Trump.
He actually came out recently and denounced his support of Trump, but now he's anti-Biden and also anti-vaccines, and like, but but his album's.
I read some of that, and that's like, yeah, there's a whole lot there that I'm a firm nope on a lot.
Exactly. Of that. Yeah, we're not unpacking it. It's just like, listen, Kanye, like, congratulations on your spiritual journey. Where's the music? Like, right. Because let me get an opinion on it so I can never listen to it again, because like too much Kanye is is too much Kanye. But you know what though, like as far as like a character study, if you look at like where Kanye's gone from when he started to where he is now, like the entire persona and the music that comes with that persona at that point in time, is really fucking interesting.
I have no doubt he's an interesting person. I just can't stand listening to him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like no, totally. I get that 100%. And I like
particularly when he's talking about running for president. It's like, just God, why?
Yeah, like I think that his, like, and when he talks politics, like I just don't think that he has the right people around him, and I personally think that his venture into religion is kind of offensive, like, and like, you know, it's not necessary. I mean, to me, it's a little offensive, and it's. I mean, well, I don't want to say offensive, and I don't want to say inauthentic either, because you know, I can't necessarily speak for anybody's spiritual journey, but it reminds me of Mace, who went from hip hop to you know, super ultra hyper religious to back to, like, you know, hip hop artists. I think Kanye West maybe does a better job of, like, actually Mace did this interesting thing. I say interesting, maybe more like provocative, where he actually denounced hip hop music when he went into religion, which isn't something that Kanye West is doing at all. Like, he actually has, you know, embraced hip hop as a way to kind of bring that messaging into his music. Which is interesting. But, you know, like, right before he went full spiritual, he made a song with Lil Pump about porn stars, and and this was around the time he was also talking about running for president. And so, like, that's just it's interesting, like, you know, and like, and then this guy was like in support of somebody that, you know, effectively hates everything Kanye stands for except money and attention, you know.
Yeah, those are two big similarities that they share, indeed.
Yeah, and, like, you know, and that's really, like, you know, like, it's though that's what though I don't think Donald Trump sees, like, you know, race as much as he sees class. Like, I think anything in regards to race about you, he probably, like, class probably reinforces it. So, you know, if you're poor, like, the way he makes fun of, like, our old, like, AG, like, he would call it, like, make fun of that dude about, like, being a you know, a dumb country redneck, even though he has, like, a law degree. So it's just like, he's just crazy like that. But, like, you know, now Kanye has effectively denounced him. Now he's back in support of Black Lives, but he's also all of these other new things. He's, like, kind of embodied, like, a whole new type of, like, you know, a whole new collection of traits that kind of goes with this new era of his music. Which, for all intents and purposes, like, you know, he's not R. Kelly, so I'm not appalled by him, you know, like, and I respect that. You know, I respect that he still tries his best, you know, and he's not actually out here hurting people. I think, like, I think that he's maybe a little more dangerous on, like, a social influential level, because, like,
Right. I mean, I think, like, and I've seen other people do this in my circles, where, you know, they find a religion and they go all in, and it's like, it's everything all the time, and then they back off it a little bit, and not that they give it up, but that they, like, oh wait, there is more to life than just that thing, right? That can still be their guiding light or whatever it is for them. But it's almost like the shiny new toy, you know, you want to play with it all the time and tell everybody about your new thing. And, like, I found that, yeah, you know, and then after a while you're like, okay, now everybody knows that I'm into this, and now it can just be a thing that's part of my life, not something that I'm, like, you know, proselytizing all the time.
right.
And so maybe that's where he's at, right? He's still in the excited kid with the new toy phase of his spiritual journey.
That's a hilarious way to put it. Yeah, man. It's interesting, man. Like, the world is going in some interesting places, man. Like, it's fun to, like, you know, I just enjoy watching, at the very least, like, regardless of what my opinion is on them, like, so long as people aren't, like, out actively hurting people, and also believe in redemption, right? So, you know, like, that means a lot. But so long as people aren't out here, like, actively hurting people, like, it's interesting to see, like, kind of, you know, especially, like, creative people, you know, artists, and, you know, actors, directors, whatever, writers, like J.K. Rowling is, like, you know, for all intents and purposes, kind of problematic.
Shooting herself in the foot repeatedly.
Right. Yeah, but, like, you know, I mean, that ain't gonna stop nobody from consuming her stuff, and, you know, and it can sure as shit get a conversation started about what is and is not okay.
Mm. Yeah, so that's it brings us back to your original question, right? Of can you separate the art from the artist if they do shitty things and are a shitty person or have shitty aspects of their personality, can you get past that and still consume the art? So if you take like J.K. Rowling, for example, you have this, huge collection of work that is now like, kids were raised on that, and there's like, it's a, it's now just canon, right? It's cultural canon for a lot of people. And, does her saying these crappy things, does that change this body of work in any way? And, I don't know. No, I mean, it's the same. None of what she's saying now um, is in that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the caveat being that if you go back to looking at that work through the lens of, oh, this person has these shitty opinions, and you go back to that work and you're like, oh, but I can now reinterpret this piece of art through that lens, and now that is shitty. You know,
Yep.
it's like, I think for a lot of, in some ways it's the Confederate statue arguing. It's like a lot of people grew up seeing these statues and they're like, oh, these are honoring, my ancestors. Well, now, like, they start to get a little more educated on where these things came from and why they're there. And you're like, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, you know what? That's not what they're there for. Yeah, you should take that down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that like that level of objectivity, I think, is something that every type of person around the world could use. Like, a little bit of humility, like, even if, like, yeah, just a little bit of objectivity goes a long way.